The heart monitor flatlined at 3:47 a.m., and the most powerful woman in Manhattan had less than 6 minutes to live. The man who would save her wasn't wearing a white coat or carrying a medical degree. He was holding a mop, wearing a janitor's uniform with patches on the elbows, and he had just taken a life-threatening gamble by donating a portion of his own heart tissue to save her. But what if the surgery didn't succeed? Before we continue, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital hummed their eternal song, casting sterile shadows across floors that gleamed like black ice. Robert Carver moved through those shadows the way he always did, quietly, methodically, invisible to the nurses rushing past, to the residents arguing over charts, to the world that had learned long ago not to see him. 42 years old, thin as winter branches, with hands rough from chemicals and eyes that had forgotten how to hope for much beyond his daughter's next smile. The blue maintenance uniform hung loose on his frame, a name tag pinned crooked over his heart. His cart squeaked as he pushed it down the cardiac wing, the sound as familiar as breathing. He'd worked the night shift for 9 years, knew every corner, every stain that refused to surrender, every doctor who bothered to nod good morning. The hospital was a universe unto itself, and he was merely a star too dim to notice, burning quietly in the background, while brighter lights commanded attention. But tonight felt different. The air carried weight, thickness, like the moment before lightning strikes. Robert paused outside the executive recovery suite, where CEO Maria Campbell had been moved 3 days ago after her emergency surgery. Through the small window, he could see her lying still as stone, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and hummed their mechanical prayers. Even unconscious, even dying, she looked formidable. Silver hair swept back from a face that had graced magazine covers, that had stared down boardrooms and bent industries to her will. He'd seen her once before the surgery, striding through the hospital lobby like she owned not just the building, but the very air inside it. She'd been visiting the children's wing, cameras following, smile perfect. She hadn't noticed him then, refilling the hand sanitizer dispensers near the elevators. Nobody ever did. Robert moved on, pushing his cart toward the supply closet. His daughter Emma would be waking soon, getting ready for school. 12 years old, too smart for her own good, asking questions about why they lived in a studio apartment while other kids had houses. Questions he couldn't answer without revealing truths that would break her heart all over again. The overhead speakers crackled to life. Code Blue, Executive Suite. Code Blue, Executive Suite. Robert froze. His hands tightened on the cart handle. Through the corridor windows, he watched nurses sprint toward Maria's room, watched Dr. Harrison, the chief cardiac surgeon, burst through the doors. The machines inside screamed. Bodies moved in choreographed chaos. Someone called for the crash cart. He should keep walking, keep cleaning, stay invisible. That was the rule. That was survival. But something held him there, watching through glass as they fought to keep Maria Campbell tethered to life. And in that moment, Robert saw something no one else could see, something hidden in plain sight that would change everything. Yet he said nothing, did nothing, just watched as the woman who had everything began to lose the only thing that truly mattered. 30 minutes passed. The Code Blue ended not with triumph, but with exhausted resignation. Dr. Harrison emerged from the suite, his face carved from stone and weariness. He spoke in low tones to the night supervisor, words that Robert couldn't hear, but could read in the slump of the doctor's shoulders, the way he rubbed his eyes like trying to erase what he'd just witnessed. Maria Campbell was alive, but barely, hanging by threads so fine they might snap with the next breath. Robert resumed his work, but his hands moved without thought, his mind elsewhere. He'd seen death before, intimate and cruel. His wife Jasmine had died 4 years ago, her hand in his, her last words a whisper about taking care of Emma, about not giving up on the dreams they'd planted together in younger soil. He'd buried those dreams alongside her, traded them for rent checks and grocery money, for Emma's school supplies, and the second-hand winter coat she needed. Dreams were luxuries he couldn't afford. But tonight, watching them try to save Maria, something old stirred in his chest. Memory, perhaps. Or regret. Or the ghost of who he used to be before life taught him that hoping for more only led to deeper falls. He cleaned the nurse's station, emptied trash bins, scrubbed floors already clean. The night stretched long and dark. Around 2 a.m., Dr. Harrison returned to Maria's suite with 2 other surgeons. They spoke in hushed urgency outside her door. Robert caught fragments as he worked nearby, pretending not to listen. Rejection accelerating. Her body's shutting down. Need a donor, but her blood type. Maybe 48 hours if we're lucky. The words painted a picture Robert understood too well. Maria's new heart, the one they transplanted 3 days ago, was failing, her immune system attacking the foreign organ like an invader. And without another donor, without a miracle, she would die. The doctors dispersed, defeated. The hallway fell quiet except for the eternal hum of machines and the soft squeak of Robert's cart as he moved to the next corridor. But he paused, glancing back at Maria's room one more time. Through the window, he could see her pale face, the gentle rise and fall of her chest, aided by ventilators. A woman who commanded empires, reduced to flesh and failing biology. He thought of Emma, how she'd looked at him last week when he'd had to tell her they couldn't afford the art program she wanted to join. The way her face had brightened anyway, saying it was okay, that maybe next year. The way she always tried to make things easier for him, this child who'd already lost so much, who deserved better than a father who cleaned floors and counted pennies. Robert closed his eyes, breathed deep. Then he did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He prayed, not to God necessarily, but to Jasmine, to the universe, to whatever force might be listening in the dark. Not for himself, never for himself, but for the strength to do what needed doing, no matter the cost. Though he didn't yet know what that would be, he could feel it approaching like distant thunder, inevitable and transforming. And somewhere in his chest, beneath the scar tissue of old grief, something that had been sleeping for years began to wake. The next night, Robert arrived for his shift, carrying the weight of a decision not yet made, but already forming in the marrow of his bones. Maria's condition had worsened. He overheard the nurses talking in grim tones, heard Dr. Harrison on the phone with the transplant registry, his voice tight with desperation. No matches, no donors. Time running out like sand through broken glass. Robert moved through his rounds mechanically, but his mind churned through memories he'd locked away. Before Jasmine died, before Emma was born, before he became invisible. Robert had been someone different. He'd had plans, ambitions, had studied pre-med at community college while working 2 jobs, dreaming of becoming a physician assistant, maybe more. Had volunteered at blood drives, learned about tissue typing, about the delicate dance between donor and recipient. Then Jasmine got pregnant. They were poor, scraping by, but happy in that fierce way young love makes possible. He'd dropped out to work full-time, supporting them both, telling himself he'd return to school later. Later never came. Jasmine's pregnancy had been complicated. Gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, a delivery that nearly killed them both. The medical bills crushed them. Robert took the night custodial job at St. Catherine's because it paid better, because it had benefits, because dreams couldn't feed a newborn daughter. He'd told himself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. Then Jasmine was diagnosed, Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, discovered too late, spreading too fast. She fought for 18 months, every day a battlefield, every night a prayer. Robert worked double shifts to pay for treatments. Insurance wouldn't cover. Spent every spare moment at her bedside, watching the woman he loved fade like stars at dawn. When she died, something in him died too. Not love for Emma, never that. But hope for anything beyond survival. He became a ghost, haunting his own life, going through motions, existing, but not living. Now, 9 years later, Robert stood outside Maria Campbell's room during his 3 a.m. break, staring through glass at another life hanging by threads. He pulled out his phone, opened the browser, started searching. Universal donor blood type, tissue compatibility, living donation. The words glowed blue in the darkness, pulling him deeper into possibility. His hands trembled as he read. Universal donors were rare. O-negative blood type, matching antigens, healthy enough to donate. The chances of being a perfect match for someone were astronomical. Robert had donated blood regularly before Jasmine got sick, remembered the technician commenting on his O-negative type, how valuable it was. Universal donor, she'd called him, able to give to anyone. He'd stopped donating after Jasmine died, stopped everything except showing up, earning money, raising Emma. But what if? The question burned. What if he was compatible? What if his tissue type matched Maria's? What if he could save her? More importantly, why would he? She was a stranger. A billionaire CEO who'd never noticed his existence, who lived in a world so far removed from his that they might as well inhabit different planets. She had everything. He had nothing. Except he did have something. He had Emma. And Emma had questions lately, hard ones, about her mother, about why they struggled when Robert worked so hard, about whether life would always feel small and confined, or if something larger might be possible. Robert looked at Maria's still form through the window, looked at his own reflection in the glass, this man worn down by circumstance, but not broken. Not yet. He thought about Jasmine's last words. Don't give up on the dreams we planted together. He'd thought she meant dreams for Emma, but maybe she'd meant dreams for himself, too. The dream of being someone who saved lives instead of just cleaning up after them. The dream of mattering. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. She must have woken early. Love you, Dad. Don't forget parent-teacher conference Thursday. Ms. Rodriguez says I'm top of my class in biology. Maybe I'll be a doctor someday. Robert's throat tightened. A doctor. His daughter wanted to be a doctor. And suddenly, the question wasn't, why would he save Maria Campbell? The question was, how could he not try? Because if he had even a chance to save a life, to show Emma that one person could matter, that circumstances didn't define destiny, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when the moment demanded it, how could he live with himself if he walked away? But there was a problem, a terrible, unavoidable problem that made his decision almost impossible. Robert closed his eyes, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones like winter cold. What he was considering would require sacrifice beyond anything he'd ever imagined. It would mean revealing secrets he'd buried, risking everything he'd built for Emma's stability, potentially destroying the only life they'd managed to create from the ashes of their grief. Yet standing here, watching another person slip toward death, Robert realized some choices aren't really choices at all. They're inevitabilities, disguised as decisions, moments where your entire life has been preparing you for one impossible act of courage. And the cost of that courage was about to become devastatingly clear. Robert requested a meeting with Dr. Harrison at 6 a.m., just as his shift ended. The surgeon looked at him with barely concealed confusion, this janitor standing in his office doorway, name tag still crooked. "Can I help you?" Dr. Harrison's voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd spent 3 days fighting death and losing. Robert's mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed to turn around, to leave, to stay invisible. But he thought of Emma's text, of Jasmine's last words, of Maria dying down the hall. "I want to be tested," he said quietly, "as a donor, for Miss Campbell." Silence stretched between them. Dr. Harrison blinked, processing. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm O-negative," Robert continued, words tumbling faster now. "Universal donor. I've donated blood before. I know the chances are slim. But if there's any possibility I'm compatible, I want to be tested." Dr. Harrison stood slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder to read. "Mr. Carver. Robert Carver. Mr. Carver, do you understand what you're suggesting? This isn't like donating blood. If by some miracle you're a tissue match, we're talking about major surgery, significant recovery time, potential complications. And even if you're compatible, your blood type alone isn't enough. Tissue typing, cross-matching, there are dozens of factors that have to align perfectly." "I understand." "Do you? Because living donation, especially from an unrelated donor, is extremely rare. The odds of you matching her are infinitesimal, and even if you did, there are medical boards, ethical reviews, psychological evaluations. The process takes time we don't have." Robert met his gaze steadily. "Then we should start now." Something flickered in Dr. Harrison's eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition of desperation echoing his own. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why would you do this for someone you don't even know?" The question Robert had been asking himself all night. He thought of Emma, thought of Jasmine, thought of 9 years spent invisible, 9 years of small existence, 9 years of teaching his daughter, through his actions, that ordinary people didn't matter, couldn't make a difference, should stay quiet and accept their place. "Because someone should," Robert said simply. "Because she's a person, and she's dying. And if I can help, then what kind of man am I if I don't at least try?" Dr. Harrison studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll order the tests, but Mr. Carver, you need to understand something. Even if you're a match, even if we move heaven and earth to expedite the process, there's a very real chance this doesn't end well, for her or for you." I know. What Robert didn't say, what he couldn't voice, was the other part of the equation, the part that made this decision catastrophic. The tests were run, blood drawn, tissue typed, cross-matched. Robert went through the motions in a daze, answering questions from physicians and ethicists, signing forms he barely read. 24 hours later, Dr. Harrison called him back to his office. The surgeon's face was pale, stunned. "I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, he said quietly. "I've never seen anything like this. Mr. Carver, you're not just compatible with Ms. Campbell, you're a near-perfect match. 6 out of 6 HLA antigens. It's extraordinary. It's impossible." "But the tests don't lie." Robert's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "So you can do the surgery?" "Technically, yes. But there's a problem, a significant one." Here it came, the truth Robert had been dreading. Dr. Harrison pulled up a file on his computer, turned the screen toward Robert. Medical records, his own. "Your pre-surgical workup revealed something concerning. You have a congenital heart condition, Mr. Carver, a minor septal defect that's been asymptomatic your entire life. It's never caused you problems because you've never pushed your body to extremes. But surgery of this magnitude, the stress, the recovery, there's a very real risk of complications." Robert's throat closed. "How real?" 20% chance of serious cardiac event during or immediately after surgery. Maybe higher. And that's just the acute risk. Long-term, living with reduced organ function while managing your underlying heart condition, you're looking at significantly shortened life expectancy. We can't predict exactly, but conservatively, you might lose 10 to 15 years. There's more, Dr. Harrison continued, his voice gentle now, almost kind. Your daughter, Emma, she's 12? Robert nodded, numb. Who takes care of her if something happens to you? During recovery, assuming everything goes well, you'll be hospitalized for at least 2 weeks, off work for 3 months minimum. Do you have family, support systems, financial reserves? No. The word barely a whisper. No family. No reserves. Just us. Dr. Harrison leaned back, the weight of impossible equations pressing down. Then I can't in good conscience recommend you proceed. The risk to you is too high. The impact on your daughter if something goes wrong, it's too much. We'll find another way. We'll keep looking for a donor. But Robert knew the truth. There was no other way. Maria had days, maybe hours. No miracle donors were coming. This was it. The impossible choice. Save a stranger and risk leaving Emma orphaned, or let Maria die and live with knowing he could have prevented it. Robert stood slowly. I need to talk to my daughter. That afternoon, sitting in their tiny studio apartment with Emma cross-legged on the worn couch, Robert told her everything. About Maria, about the tests, about what he was considering, and what it might cost. Emma was silent for a long time, her face unreadable. 12 years old, but her eyes carried weights children shouldn't bear. Will you die? She asked finally. I don't know. There's risk. But there's also a very good chance I'll be fine. Like Mom? Her voice cracked. Because they said she'd probably be fine too. Robert pulled her close, feeling her tremble. This is different. The doctors know what they're dealing with. They'll be careful. But Emma, I need you to understand something. I'm asking, not telling. This is our decision, not just mine. If you say no, I won't do it. We'll figure out another way. She pulled back, looking at him with those 2 old eyes. Why does it have to be you? Because sometimes it does. Because I'm the only match. Because I can. But what about me? You're everything. You're the reason I'm still breathing. But baby, if I do this, if I save her, I'm teaching you something important. That we don't turn away when we can help. That one person can matter. That ordinary people like us. We're not invisible. We're capable of extraordinary things. Tears streamed down Emma's face. I don't want to lose you. You won't. I promise I'll fight to come back to you. She was quiet for a long time. Then, in a voice barely audible, she said, Mom would want you to do it. Robert's eyes burned. Yeah, she would. Then save her, Dad. Save her. But you better keep your promise. That night, Robert signed the final consent forms. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. Emergency authorization granted. Medical boards bypassed through a combination of Maria's connections and the dire urgency of her condition. Dr. Harrison pulled Robert aside in pre-op. Last chance to change your mind. Robert thought of Emma, brave and terrified. Thought of Jasmine, her last words. Thought of 9 years invisible. And this one chance to be seen. Let's do it. They wheeled him into the operating room. The lights above blazed white and infinite. He thought he heard music, or maybe just the sound of machines breathing, keeping time with hearts and hope. The anesthesia began to pull him under. His last conscious thought was a prayer, not for himself, for Emma, for Maria, for all of them. Then darkness, complete and absolute. And in that darkness, Robert Carver, invisible janitor, ordinary man, became something else entirely. A bridge between life and death. a miracle disguised as choice. A proof that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones holding the very thing we need to survive. But whether he would survive to see the impact of his impossible sacrifice that remained written in the uncertain ink of surgical outcomes and fates not yet decided. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm, marking time between heartbeats, between hope and loss, between the man he'd been and whoever he might become, if he became anything at all. Robert woke to white ceiling tiles and the steady beep of monitors. Pain bloomed across his torso, sharp and insistent. But he was breathing. He was alive. A nurse noticed his eyes opening, smiled gently. "Welcome back, Mr. Carver. The surgery went well." "You did beautifully." His voice came out scratchy. "Maria, Ms. Campbell is stable. The transplant took. She's breathing on her own. Dr. Harrison will brief you soon, but early signs are very promising." Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by panic. "My daughter, Emma, where? She's in the waiting room, has been for 12 hours straight. We'll bring her in soon." The next days blurred together. Pain medication, physical therapy, doctors checking vitals, monitoring for rejection, watching his heart carefully. Dr. Harrison visited daily, his expression a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal awe. "You shouldn't be doing this well," he said on day 4. "Your recovery is remarkable. And Maria, she's improving faster than we dared hope. The match was extraordinary. You saved her life." But the words felt hollow, because now, in the aftermath, Robert had to face what he'd done, not the heroism of it, the cost. He'd lost his job. Hospital policy forbade employees from donating organs to patients. Conflict of interest, they called it. Liability issues. He was terminated the day after surgery. His apartment rent was due in 2 weeks. He had no income, no prospects. Emma was staying with a neighbor who'd agreed to help temporarily, but that couldn't last, and his body felt different, weaker, changed in fundamental ways he didn't yet understand. The surgery had taken more from him than just tissue and time. On day 8, Maria Campbell walked into his room. She moved slowly, carefully, but she moved. Color had returned to her face. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, took him in where he lay propped against pillows. "Mr. Carver." Her voice carried the authority of someone used to commanding rooms. "I understand I owe you my life." Robert didn't know what to say. "You're looking better." She pulled a chair close, sat with the precise posture of someone relearning their own body. "They told me what you risked, what you gave up, what it might cost you. I'm alive. You're alive. That's what matters." "Is it?" She leaned forward. "Because from what I understand, you sacrificed your job, your financial stability, your long-term health, possibly years of your life, for a woman you didn't know. A woman who never would have noticed you walking past in the hallway. Why? The question again, the one everyone kept asking, like altruism was so foreign it required explanation. "Because it was right," Robert said simply. "Because I could." Maria studied him with those sharp eyes. Then something shifted in her expression, softening. "I've spent my life accumulating power," she said quietly. "Building empires, winning battles, being the smartest person in every room. And not once in 40 years did anyone ever sacrifice anything for me without expecting something in return. Not once did someone see me as a person rather than an opportunity or an obstacle." She paused. "Until a janitor with a daughter and a debt decided I was worth saving." Tears gathered in her eyes, shocking in their raw honesty. "I don't deserve this gift," she whispered. "But I swear to you, I will honor it." Before Robert could respond, she stood. "Your daughter, Emma. She's been sitting in that waiting room reading biology textbooks. She wants to be a doctor. Maria smiled. Then she will be. Full scholarship, best schools, whatever she needs. Your housing, medical bills, living expenses, all covered. And when you're recovered, if you want to finish your education, pre-med, nursing, whatever path you choose, that's covered too. I can't give you back what you lost. But I can make sure you and Emma never struggle again. Robert's throat closed. You don't have to. I do, she interrupted firmly. Not as payment. As gratitude. As acknowledgement that you saw me as human when you had every reason not to. You gave me more than a chance to live. You gave me a reason to deserve living. She left before Robert could find words. But later, when Emma was finally allowed in, when she climbed carefully onto the bed and curled against his good side, her tears soaking his hospital gown, Robert understood something profound. Miracles weren't just about saving lives. They were about the ripples afterward, the changes sparked, the invisible becoming seen. Did you mean it? Emma whispered. That ordinary people can do extraordinary things? Robert held her closer, feeling the steady beat of his changed heart. I know it now. Because we're not ordinary, sweetheart. We're just ordinary enough to forget sometimes how much power we carry. 6 months later, Robert sat in a college classroom. Pre-med, second chance, dreams unearthed. Emma sat in the back row, there to watch his first lecture. He'd been invited to speak. This janitor-turned-donor whose story had somehow leaked, had gone viral, had reminded a world obsessed with celebrity and status that heroes looked like anyone, everyone, all of us. Maria sat front row, healthy now, thriving, transformed not just physically but fundamentally. She'd restructured her company's giving programs, funded hospitals, donated millions to organ transplant research, used her platform to tell his story, their story, about what happens when we see each other truly. Robert looked out at the faces watching him, students, doctors, dreamers. My name is Robert Carver, he began, and I used to be invisible. The words echoed in the hushed room. I want to tell you about the night I decided to be seen, about what it cost, about what it saved, about how one choice, one moment of choosing courage over comfort, can change more than just one life. It can change everything. And as he spoke, as he shared the weight of miracles and the price of mattering, Robert realized the truest thing of all. That sacrifice without witness is just loss. But sacrifice chosen freely, given willingly, received with gratitude, that becomes transformation. For everyone touched by its grace, he'd given Maria his heart, metaphorically and literally. But what he'd received in return was bigger than gratitude or security. He'd received his life back, his dreams, his belief that ordinary people, overlooked and underestimated, carry within them the seeds of extraordinary change. The invisible janitor had become visible. The forgotten man remembered. The ordinary life, shot through with purpose. And in the end, that was the miracle. Not that he'd saved her, but that in saving her, he'd saved himself too. If this story touched something in you, hit that like button and share it with someone you want to hear with. Subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story.